Alright guys, welcome back to another Metalstorm video, and today I'm on the playtest preview. I'm going to be covering some balance changes that might be coming to the game, but before I continue, I just want to mention to you guys that these values are subject to change, so keep that in mind. As with the nature of these balance changes, a few aircraft got buffs and a few got nerfs, as well as assault cannons getting a buff, and a few mods getting nerfs as well. Blast resistance got a buff. So I'm going to be covering everything that has been changed. I'm going to be leaving timestamps in the description so you guys can follow along, and I will also be providing a document with a summary of the buffs and nerfs. So first on the list, we have the J-35 Draken. The Draken got a buff to HP, top speed, acceleration, missile damage, and passive ability, top speed, and acceleration. Okay, so we got 20 extra HP. And keep in mind, all these stats are going to be for level 20. So you got 20 extra HP, 101 more kilometers to the top speed, and an increase of 5 meters per second to the acceleration. For the manual missiles, they received 10 more damage, but they got a decrease in speed, so minus 360 kilometers per hour to the missile speed, and also minus 3 degrees turn rate on the manual missiles. For the special ability, it got a buff, so instead of 10 seconds, it's now 5 seconds on the cooldown at max level. For the passive ability, it also got a buff. So now it provides 20% speed increase and a 75% increase in acceleration. So that's plus 4% to top speed and plus 15% to acceleration. In my honest opinion, I still think this ability isn't very useful on the Draken. I've tried it out in a match, and I used it like once, maybe at the start of the match to get to the center faster, but that's about it. I don't see many use cases for this unless you're trying to get to the center faster or you're attempting to flee. The buff is okay, I guess. I mean, if you like the passive on the Draken, well, you have something to look forward to. Okay, let's move on to the next aircraft. The Mirage F-3. So the Mirage got... On the list it says the Mirage got a buff, but I couldn't find anything. When I compared the stats, there was only -1 damage to the max cannon damage. That's the only thing I saw when I compared the stats. Missile damage is the same, missile speed is the same, HP, all of that. While editing this video, I did find out that the Mirage got a buff to its passive ability. So instead of being 320 meters per second, it is now 400 meters per second. So let's move on to the next aircraft on the list. And this one is one of my favorites. The F-106 got a buff. So right away you can see that it has more missiles and drop tanks, which means the Delta Dart here will be getting extra fuel and more firepower. It now has 300 hit points, so that's plus 30 hit points to the original stats it had, but it got a decrease in afterburner fuel. Before it was 15, now it's 12, but it makes up for that with the reserve fuel, so that's an extra 7 seconds of fuel with the tanks. I think that's pretty good. And it also received 2 more manual missiles. You can see them on the wings. Along with that, it got a buff to the cannons, so it got 111 more cannon damage, max cannon damage. It also got a reduction in spin up time. So before it was 1.28 and it was brought down to 0.8, which is a very welcome change. You don't have to hold down the firing button as long anymore. There is also a buff to the passive. So instead of being 28%, it was buffed to 35% lock range bonus, which I think is pretty good. Now on to the next jet on the list, the MiG-21. The MiG-21 got a reduction in passive ability cooldown. So instead of being 16 seconds, it was brought down to 11 seconds. But it also got a nerf to the IR missile damage. I think it was 130 before, now it's 120. Let me just check to make sure. Yeah, so that is correct. It received a nerf to the IR missiles, so it does 10 less damage now. That's all I'm seeing for the MiG-21, so let's move on to the next aircraft on the list, which is the Su-47. Alright, so the Su-47 got a nerf to the cannons, nothing significant, just one less damage to the max damage. And it got a buff to the passive ability, Radiant Flares. So it got plus 10% reduced damage when you have a flare in the air. So before it was 40%, now it's 50%. And the next aircraft on the list is the F-4, and another one of my favorites. I really like to fly the F-4. It's one of my favorite jets in the game. And let me tell you, this buff, absolutely amazing. Instead of having IR missiles, now we have rockets. To be honest with you, I did not like using the IR missiles on the F-4. They felt very inaccurate, even at close range. So I relied more on using my hunters, and I only use my IRs when I really had to, when I had no other choice. But this is a very welcome change. I don't mind having rockets. I have flown a match with this to test it out, and it is absolutely amazing. So, as far as the stats go, the F4 got a buff to top speed, plus 50 kilometers per hour to the top speed, and plus 5 meters per second to the acceleration. So the F4 is now faster, and it also accelerates faster. Very welcome change. And of course, we get rockets, 76 light rockets. They do 50 damage. They have a range of 1.5 kilometers, blast radius 7, rate of fire 8 per second, speed 3,420 kilometers per hour. For the cannon, it got a nerf. Again, nothing significant, just one less damage to the max damage. And it got a buff to the spin up time. So instead of being 1.28 like the F-106, it is now 0.8 seconds. Along with the addition of rockets, the F-4 now carries 6 hunter missiles. It also got a buff to the passive. Before it was 4% health per second, now it is 5% health per second, so that's plus 1% to the passive. The next aircraft on our list is the Mirage F-1. Mirage got a nerf to the cannons, one less damage, just as before, and a buff to the passive evasion flares. So before it was 8 seconds cooldown at max level, now it is 4 seconds, so that is great as well. And generally, there has been a buff to assault cannons, so if you're flying a jet with assault cannons, it will likely have a shorter spin-up time, which is a great change if you ask me. Now, blast resistance, the mod, got a buff. So before it was, I believe, 16% damage reduction from missile and rocket hits. Now it is 20%. So that's plus 4% to the damage reduction. Alright, that is everything for the buffs. Now let's cover the nerfs. The first aircraft that got a nerf is the A4 Skyhawk. The A4 got a nerf to HP, minus 20 HP to the max hit points. So instead of being 310, it was brought down to 290. But it got a buff to top speed. It got an increase of 50 kilometers to the top speed. And it also got a reduction in ideal turning speed. So before it was at 756 kilometers per hour for the ideal turning speed, and that was brought down to 720. It also received a nerf to the afterburner fuel. Before it was 24, now it's 22. One less damage to the internal precision cannon. No, my bad. One less damage to the external assault cannon. So before it was 274, now it's 273. Nothing major. It also received a reduction in spin up time. So instead of being 0.3 seconds spin up time, it is now 0.2. And before, the external assault cannons did not have an overheat time. You could just use them indefinitely until the ammo was depleted. Now it has an overheat time of 5.13 seconds. There is also a slight nerf to the internal precision cannon, taking it down from 178 to 177. That's all for the A4. Let's move on to the next aircraft, the J-20. And I think this is a very good change because J-20s would just go up to space and spam the hell out of you with radar missiles. So the J-20 did get a nerf to its missiles. It now carries 4 radars instead of 6, but it also got some buffs. It got plus 3 lock angle to the IR missiles. So before it was 7 degrees, now it is 10 degrees. And of course, the radar missiles, instead of carrying 6, it now carries 4. And the passive got a buff. So it got plus 5% to the missile lock range. Before it was 20% missile lock range and I believe 60% missile lock time reduction against your lock target. Now it is 25% to missile lock range and 75% to missile lock time reduction. That's all for the J-20, and on to the next jet, which is the MiG-19. The MiG-19 got some nerfs. It got a reduction in total hit points, bringing it down from 220 to 200. It also got a nerf to turn rate, so instead of 39 degrees, it was brought down to 38 degrees. But it also got an increase in ideal turning speed, so that's a nerf. It was brought up to 666 kilometers per hour instead of 648. But it also got a buff to afterburner fuel, so it got 1 extra second of base afterburner fuel. The Beam Rider missiles also got a nerf. Their speed was reduced to 4,680 kilometers per hour from what I think it was 5,400, and the cannons on the MiG-19 also got a nerf, but it's nothing major, just a nerf to ideal range. It was brought down to 0.7 kilometers instead of 0.9. MiG-19 also got some buffs to the passive. So instead of 40% increased cannon damage, it now has a 50%. Alright, so that is everything for the MiG-19. Let's move on to the next aircraft, which is the Tornado ADV. Now, the Tornado got a nerf to top speed, which I don't really like. The Tornado is one of my favorite jets. It's one of the few swing wing jets in the game, and I loved how fast it was. While this isn't too bad of a nerf, it only received a reduction of 25 kilometers per hour to the top speed, which brings it in line with the F-111. It also got a reduction in turn rate, so before it was 38, now it's 37. There was also an increase to the ideal turning speed. So instead of 720, it was brought up to 738 kilometers per hour. But there was a buff to the special ability. So initially the cooldown was 30 seconds, and that was brought down to 15 seconds at max level. That is a very welcome change as well. There was also a buff to the passive ability. So now you gain 50% fuel consumption rate reduction for 5 seconds, and you also gain 35% total fuel back. Initially, it was 40% fuel consumption rate reduction, so that was brought up to 50. And it was 28% total fuel back, and that was brought up to 35. You get plus 7% more fuel from the passive. That's all for the ADV. And the last aircraft on the list is the Su-25. Here it is. Alright, so the Su-25 got a nerf to the rocket firing speed. The rate of fire was initially 1.2 rockets per second, and that was brought down to 1 rocket per second. There was also a nerf to the special ability cooldown. So initially it was 40 seconds, and that was brought up to 45 seconds. However, it also received a buff to the passive ability. There was an increase to the top speed by 6%. So instead of 24% increased top speed, you now have 30%. And we also got plus 20% to the acceleration. So before it was 80, and now it is 100%. Okay, so that's all aircraft that received buffs and nerfs, and now for the mods that got nerfed. And you can probably already guess what mods were nerfed. Daredevil Turning and Disruptive Flares, the mods that we like to use most. So Daredevil Turning, the turn rate is still the same, but how close you need to be to terrain has been increased. So initially it was 300 meters. That granted you a lot of leeway, but now it is 150 meters. So you have to be a lot closer to terrain to activate Daredevil Turning. And for Disruptive Flares, initially it was minus 80% to gun lead range. Now it was brought down to minus 60%. And damage control also got a nerf. That is a special ability of some of the flankers, I believe. The Su-27 in particular, I know has that special ability. Here it is. So damage control, health per second, plus 8% for 3 seconds, cooldown of 45 seconds. The duration is now 1 second less than before. Initially, it was 4 seconds. And the cooldown was brought up from 11 seconds to 45 seconds. So that's an increase of 34 seconds to the cooldown. But you can use it infinitely during matches. There is no limit to how many times you can use this per match. You are simply only limited by the cooldown. I think that's a pretty good change. But with that said, I would like to hear you guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Were these changes good? Were these changes bad? Did they ruin your favorite aircraft? Were you upset about Daredevil Turning and Disruptive Flares being nerfed? Let me hear it all in the comments. That is everything covered. You guys can go ahead and check out the summary in the description below. I will link the document there. For the rest of the video, I'm just going to be showcasing some of the aircraft. I'm going to be flying them so you can see what these new changes are like. So feel free to click off if you only came for the stats. And for those of you who want to see gameplay, stick around. Even if you're flying in a straight line, the passive takes so long to activate. And if you make a slight shift, then it just deactivates instantly. There's no leeway. There's no freedom. You have to be perfectly straight, let go of your controls. It's so stupid. I have never really liked the J35 in Metalstorm, and this definitely does not make me dislike it any less. you've made it to the end of the video. If you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Until next time, I will see you in the next video. Bye.